has been a challenging year. In March 13th, is when our academic world changed a lot. We had anticipated we'd be closed for about 2 weeks after the March break, but then, as we all know, the Premier and the Minister of Education did the rightful thing and closed for the rest of the month, and then there was an extension, and then most recently last week to the end of June. So as those extensions keep happening, it restructures our thinking. So the first 2 weeks that the students were at home after the March break, it was really the province of Ontario had their website available for students to continue their learning, thinking that we might return in week 3. But once it extended into week 3 and beyond, we ended it into distance learning, and that is back on the school board, back on our teachers to provide that instruction in a very virtual way that is very different from our typical way that students learn. And then we've been negotiating through all of what that means for all of our students, whether they're the little ones in JK, our students with complex needs, all the way up to our students potentially leaving our high schools to graduate and to move on to the workplace, college, university, and some of our students that stay to 21, and all the variants in between, trying to program properly to make sure they're met with the most success between now and June 30th. From JK to grade 6, teachers do approximately 2 hours a day, but as soon as we get into the intermediate grades, 7s and 8s, it's about 10 hours a week. In terms of the delivery, it can take many different ways. It could be through email, it could be through taped means, it could be synchronous learning or live. The teachers can avail themselves to all those tools and choose them accordingly, because they have to use their professional judgment, what's best for their students. You might hear a lot about the live learning and how there's been a suggestion by the provincial government to really go into that. And for us, it's what's best for the kids. That's, to have a student be live with their students, that might not be comfortable for them either. So we have to make sure that we allow the teachers that know the students, that know where they are in their learning pathway, to choose the right tools and the right pedagogical means to make sure we have a successful completion to this school year. We have had families that have reached out and they can't believe what our teachers have done, our educational assistants have done, our dedicated childhood educators have done, our principals and vice principals, reaching out to families, making sure that they're providing curriculum, making sure they're providing supports for them, because they understand there's only so much we can do, but we're trying to maximize all we can do given the present circumstance. Some families, they would have access to technology and access to internet, where some of our families, for a variety of reasons, would not. So part of our strategy was to mitigate that. Once we fully went into distance learning, as I mentioned earlier, after the first 2 weeks into week 3, we went through what we call a loaner device exercise. So we put out a survey to families. They could self-select into that survey and indicate to us if they needed a device. And we currently have over 1,700 devices that are on loan to families. And there's some families with multiple children and they might have a device in the home, but as soon as you introduce distance learning, there might be a greater need to have more devices in that home. Also, in terms of, even though we might give a loaner device, they might live in remote areas or areas even in urban settings. They might have challenges with internet support. So we provided cell phones that are only used as a hotspot within the home. So if we give them a loaner device and a cell phone that they can't use in the traditional way we use a phone, that helped bridge the gap between access to the internet. The other thing that we're most proud of is our students with our most complex needs. They might have specialty equipment at the school, walkers, Rifkin bikes, and we have made arrangements to have that in the home. So they could still participate in tele-occupational therapy or physical therapy, and those children can still continue their learning journey physically, emotionally, mentally, academically, also in the home. We wanted to make sure we had all those tools available, so we've made all those arrangements. Now, as we enter into the summer, the Ministry of Education is well aware that students would be not in their schools for the better part of 3 months. So their strategy, which isn't fully developed, we still have some time, is that for the secondary students and some of our elementary, there will be summer school. It will be in a virtual means to begin with. In elementary, we have our elementary summer learning program. That's for the little ones. Again, it will at least start virtual because we have to take our guidance from the public health authorities around the parameters. And as of right now, that's what we're looking at. But if they happen to recess a little bit, then we can look at more face-to-face exercises. So there's the secondary program, the elementary program. The other one is transition planning for our students that most vulnerable, have complex needs. We're going to have a program to reintroduce them back into their environments in school. As we know, familiarity, building routines, all that is really necessary for students to have a successful start to the school year. So for those students specifically, we're looking at a late summer transition program. Again, all the plans are still being formed. We haven't received all the information from the ministry to fully structure our thinking in terms of planning, funding, but we're going to get there. And then the final piece is that there's a real desire, as we know, with mental health and wellness. We have students that might have had conditions prior to the closure, and those families and those individuals may have now entered into crisis since the closure, and we want to make sure that over the summer we provide those supports and access to those supports in the summer, so once again we can set the table for a very successful re-entry into the next academic year in September, whatever that might look like. Our hope is always that we're going to be back in school, all of our kids can join our schools, will be some very familiar resumption of learning, some very familiar resumption of work for our staff. That's our hope. We don't know between now and what summer brings in terms of COVID and the levels of infection and what that might bring. But we are preparing for whatever we need to do, whether that be certain grades going back or students going back every second day or being some blend with virtual learning. Although our plans aren't fully fleshed, we know we have to be flexible and nimble to make sure that as we approach September, we have to approach it with proper planning, proper thinking to make sure everyone is safe first and that we provide the best learning environment we can, given the circumstances that might still be present. They would like for their children in grade 8 to have the full experience and the traditions of, dressing up and going to the school and going across the stage and grabbing their diploma, as well as the parents that have older children that are graduating from our high schools. That's what they would like to see, but they know that can't happen. There's been lots of discussion around having virtual graduations, the drive-by graduations. You don't have to look too far on the internet and you'll see a lot of really creative ways of doing. For us, we waited until last week until we officially knew that schools would be closed until June. So that really preempted our thinking to believe that we are going to postpone our graduations and have them when it's safe to do so. We would like to think it may be late summer. We'd like to think it might be late September. We'd like to think it might be late October. But we wanted to reserve the opportunity to provide that traditional, regular graduation if we could. So as of right now, for our grade 8 and grade 12 students, the Catholic School Board is providing lawn signs. And we're going to be giving them to every family, and we made considerations for families that don't live in homes, but they live in apartment buildings, to provide them the signs so that there's some recognition. There's also, the grade 8 teachers, they will be providing a little bit of something, like it could be a little video tribute. Of course, there's privacy concerns in there, so we have to inform, provide guidelines, and provide some guidance. But our hope is that somewhere in the fall, when it's safe to do so, we will reclaim the graduations how the parents would like to see them. Anyone would probably like to wait and have a graduation as they've always envisioned it, rather than have something now that because it's our work, but it's their memory. And in front of mind was in our decisions were the students and families entrusted to our care.